Hello and welcome to the Doc Talk. I'm your host, Amir Mian. So in this podcast, I have conversations with our institutional leaders and colleagues, and we discuss professional work, perspective on different topics, and definitely valuable life lessons. And today, it's about institutional leadership, culture, and a lot more. In the long run, I hope that this podcast will facilitate professional enrichment, be a source of inspiration, and perhaps even stir innovative ideas that could help us connect professionally and grow collectively. With that said, today I am super excited and delighted, honored to welcome our guest, who is Walker Chair in Ophthalmology, Executive Vice Chair, and the Dean, College of Medicine, University of Arkansas for Medical Sciences, Dr. Chris Westfall. Welcome to the Doc Talk.
Thank you so much, Amir, for inviting me to be on the program. It is an absolute pleasure to be here.
So, Dr. Westfall, you began your career from Military Academy at West Point, and then to Ohio State, and subsequently to Harvard Medical School, and thereafter serving in the U.S. Air Force, retiring at the rank of colonel before coming over to UMS. And I must say, it's an amazing journey, and I am sure it's a fulfilling one. So could you talk about your transition from military to civilian medicine back then, and from academic medicine to institutional leadership now?
Of course, Amir. First of all, I want to thank you for the opportunity to be with you today and to be a part of this series. I very much appreciate
Thank you.
the opportunity. It has been an amazing journey, and interestingly, the transition from military medicine, then to private practice, then back to academic medicine, and finally to institutional leadership has really been very smooth. And I think that's because in each of those roles, the guiding principle has been to do what is right for the patient.
Sure.
No matter which of those roles I was in, no matter which organization, that was the guiding principle. I think adherence to the Hippocratic Oath is paramount, and that's been the standard part of each of the roles in my professional life.
Right. What are the aspects of that oath that you think are really sacred to our hearts?
You know, I think that there are a couple of aspects, as you well know. First of all, we ask all of our medical students when they graduate to take that oath.
Right.
And it has provided the guiding principles for physicians for centuries.
Sure.
And that I would say that there are two tenets. One is first, do no harm. I think we all know that. You always take actions which are designed to improve another's lot, if you will. And the second thing is, to put it succinctly, is to put the patient's needs first, above all others. And I think that if you're going to succinctly state the Hippocratic Oath, those are the two things. Do you have a different opinion?
No, exactly. I mean, this is what I would imagine, and this is obviously so sacred to our hearts and to the profession itself. So,
Right.
And that has tested for centuries and centuries. So it sure has tested time. So, so Chris, as Dean of the Med School, you obviously oversee teaching and research and clinical care. They're all different domains, and there are maybe some different stakeholders in each one of those domains. And they may or may not have different priorities, and sometimes they may have some unique goals which may or may not overlap. So the question is, as a leader, how do you find common ground amongst all different stakeholders while keeping in mind the long-term institutional goals?
I think you've hit upon the most important thing, which is to identify that there are different stakeholders
Sure.
involved in every decision. And the trick is to identify all of the stakeholders, because commonly errors are made in decisions when one forgets to include a given stakeholder.
Right.
So step one, realize there are stakeholders. Step two, identify those that are involved or should be involved in each decision. Then communicate with each stakeholder, hear what their concerns are, hear what their issues are, hear their perspective, and really listen. And then incorporate those concerns as the decision is made. Now, not every stakeholder is going to be happy with every decision,
Sure.
but it's incumbent upon leadership to listen to them, to each stakeholder, and then once the decision is made, to communicate back what the decision was and to let the stakeholder know that they were at least heard.
So the capacity to listen and the capacity to communicate are probably the most important aspects.
Absolutely. And again, I would reiterate, the trick is to make sure we get all stakeholders involved and really consider their perspectives.
Right. So obviously, in an academics institution such as ours, professional development and growth is a critical aspect of that leadership that oversees and promotes both on an individual level and also at an institutional levels. And there's no doubt, professional growth and development requires several conditions. Let's say individual competence, let's call it host factors, environment, the bigger system that one works in, and importantly, support of the immediate supervisors, or who plays to quite an extent an important role, not only in to retain but also to be a talent magnet. So in your view, what are the qualities of leadership within the context of a medical setting that nurture growth for trainees and younger faculty who are just starting off?
So I think you've hit upon a really, really important aspect of leadership. And I'm going to diverge a little bit from the medical field.
Sure.
And I'll tell you a little bit of a story that, although it sounds a little bit tangential, does have some applicability.
Sure.
So when I was a cadet at West Point, we were engaged in the war in Vietnam. All of my professors were active duty Army officers. They all had their advanced degrees after 1 or 2 tours at war.
Right.
They were all highly decorated. They had Bronze Stars, Silver Stars, Purple Hearts.
Right.
But only one had a Medal of Honor.
Right.
I had a conversation with one of my other professors, and he said, when I was in Vietnam, there were people that did equally heroic acts as the person that had the best medal.
Right.
And he said the difference was he was recognized. Think about that.
Right.
Every time I see someone get an award, I think this person deserved that, but somebody had to value the person and recognize the action.
Sure.
So the difference is that leadership has an obligation to recognize when the people that follow them do great things, and then to recognize it with an award.
Right.
So I think that's a really important aspect of leadership. Secondly, I think that it's incumbent upon leadership to help the people that report to them identify their professional goals, then give them opportunities to advance those goals, get them involved in committees, get them involved in seminars, get them involved in different opportunities which will advance their career, and then recognize and support them. I think it's a critical part of leadership.
Right. And obviously when people are recognized, then there's an enhanced sense of belonging, and that's just sort of encourages them to do more.
Yes, right. It's a feedback loop,
It
if
is
you
a
will.
feedback, yeah. So while we're on the healthcare and medical education, we're all providers, and at times we could also be consumers of healthcare, and the rising cost of healthcare coupled with the highest budget deficit in our history is, we all recognize it's not sustainable for too long. And despite spending about 18% of our entire GDP on healthcare, which is the highest in the world, we still struggle as a country to achieve those desired outcomes in terms of health of our population. So our medical schools and clinical training does not address population health, and more specifically, the social determinants of health. So the question is, why do you think it is important for us to be aware of social determinants of health as clinicians? And do you think it is one of the weakest links in our medical education?
So, first of all, Amir, I think that you're exactly right. Social determinants of health are a huge issue.
Right.
But I also believe that we are directing more and more well-deserved attention to this aspect of the care that we deliver to our patients.
Right.
At our medical school, at UAMS, one of the first clinical experiences which we offer, and in fact require of our students, is to attend one of our free community clinics, which specifically helps them to understand healthcare disparities.
Right.
The LCME, which as you know is the National Licensure Committee for Medical Education, mandates that medical schools address social determinants of health. And we, in conjunction with this requirement, but independently of it as well, offer many, many opportunities to our students. And as another example, we have simulation classes for our students in which we have patients who are trained to be those patients to represent different social situations,
right,
so that when they interact with the students can think about and learn about those social determinants which we normally otherwise wouldn't have considered. We also are, I'm involved in a federal grant which is specifically designed to increase our student exposure to rural and other underserved communities.
right.
And finally, as an example, we offer a dual degree. We offer our medical students an opportunity to get a master's in public health, which specifically looks at population health,
right,
and social determinants. And currently in our medical school, 111 of our students are getting a dual degree.
Oh, wow. Okay. So this is part of the, so it's a 4-year part of the same MD program. Is that how it is?
It is a program that's done in conjunction with the College of Public Health, and it's a dual degree, and it's for the full 4 years.
Okay.
So the students graduate with an MPH, Master of Public Health, and the MD.
MD. Okay.
So we're doing a lot to address social determinants of health because, as you point out, it's so important.
It sure, I mean, it sure is.
Yep.
So, so while we're still on this same medical education and to an extent healthcare, slightly different topic, but, I mean, it appears to me that, unlike some other industries, for example, let's say retail, finance, and some of the other industries, within the traditional healthcare system, we clinicians are sort of taught and trained on some very sort of specific platforms, and at times, and does not, we're not at times very actively prompted to think perhaps outside the box and to experiment with different modalities or innovation for that matter, or even entrepreneurship. So as an institutional leader, what's your advice for clinicians who may have an interest in entrepreneurship and innovation, and why do you think it is important to promote innovation in medical teaching and clinical care?
So I think there are two parts to the question. The
Sure.
first is thinking outside the box, and I think that that's really important. In my opinion, it's the result of a wide range of experiences. In my own experience, I was in the military for a while, and I found that there was direct applicability of what I learned as a military officer to leadership within medicine.
Right.
I also, before I was an ophthalmologist, I was a general surgeon.
Okay.
And I found that many of the things that I did and learned as a general surgeon had direct applicability, but in an outside-the-box fashion, to my work as an eye surgeon,
Right.
in ophthalmology. I think that conversations with people in other fields are very important. They all help us to think a little bit outside the box.
Sure.
The missions of academic healthcare are basically three: patient care, education, and research. And all of those missions impact patient care sometime in either now or in the future.
Right.
Innovation couples with research to provide the tools that will be used by physicians in the future at some point.
Sure.
And so it's an absolutely fundamentally important that the university promote innovation. And as our clinicians and basic scientists develop advances, I urge them, at least in our university, to collaborate with our technology licensing office and our business incubator, UAMS BioVentures.
Right. And I actually had an experience with UMS BioVenture. So during COVID, right at the start in March, I had because there was a ton of time and I really didn't know what else to do. So, and they had an open course at that time, and I registered and I completed their course. I think it was phenomenal. I mean, it really brought up new perspective to entrepreneurship, which was really very helpful.
And it's what we do, and it's really important. And I think that most universities have a similar office,
Right.
which helps physicians who may not have the business acumen to pursue a patent or to license specific scientific advances which they develop. But most universities have such an office, just as we do, to help with physicians to
Right.
pursue innovation and the commercial aspects of their research.
Right, right. So let's talk about a slightly different topic now. So, one of the topic which is near to all of us is physician burnout, which in these challenging times, we clinicians are particularly under tremendous stress and pressures, which was also there, but maybe to a slightly lesser degree during the pre-COVID times. And we physicians are sometimes I'm included. I'm part of the. I'm guilty equally. We're notorious for not taking care of ourselves. Be it our collective personality traits, culture in general medicine, which may at times gives us this sense of overconfidence that, quote, "it can't happen to me" syndrome. So the question is, what should be the top 3 institutional strategic goals that primarily targets well-being and prevents burnout among medical students and trainees, because their needs are uniquely different?
Well, Amir, you really have picked great topics to talk about today, and very, very timely topics, because all of us in medicine are worried about burnout. Very timely as we look at hospitals across the country where nurses and doctors have had no break from COVID or are facing the onslaught of COVID. Burnout is really a concern. So in my answer, I'd like to expand it to not just include
Sure.
students and trainees or residents. I also would like to include faculty, because
Sure.
I think that they're part of the responsibility of this university as well.
Absolutely.
But I'll break it into 3 as you've requested. The first goal would be to recognize that burnout is an issue in any organization, in any healthcare organization, and to make sure that we take specific measures to address various aspects of burnout. So surveys at this university, at the UAMS, confirm that this is a significant concern. And we have regular surveys, usually at 2-year intervals, because you can get over-surveyed and get what's called survey fatigue too much. So
Yes,
we
sure.
do about every 2 years, we do another survey to assess burnout, sort of to feel the pulse of what's going on at this university.
Sure.
And once we get back these surveys, leadership makes a concerted effort and actively engages in developing targeted remedies to those aspects of burnout that are identified by those people that are a part of our faculty and our staff and our students and our residents. The second strategic goal would be to provide ways for individuals to reduce stress, which is a major part of burnout, as you know.
Right.
The chancellor at UAMS has done this by appointing a chief wellness officer. He regularly messages encouraging personal fitness. We also have a wellness center under Dr. Puru Thapa that offers mindfulness classes on a regular basis. And in response to the added stresses of the pandemic, Dr. Eric Macias, our Associate Dean for Faculty Affairs, has convened a working group which has published a list of many resources which are specifically designed to help with the added stresses of the pandemic.
Right, right.
He also provides workshops for faculty and residents of individual departments to address burnout. And there are a myriad of examples, but we take burnout very, very seriously and have implemented many, many policies, measures, and programs to help our faculty to deal with what is a very real problem.
It sure is. And obviously, we were at a higher rate before the pandemic. Now, pandemic has really amplified it to a great extent, and it's obviously the concern.
All you have to do is turn on the TV at night and look, and you can see how much stress there is. And interestingly, one of the things that you may not be aware, but when the pandemic hit very early on and New York was overwhelmed,
Right.
we sent a team of doctors and nurses specifically to help our colleagues to help them deal with that.
Right.
And I sometimes think that that is a solution to stress, and that is to recognize when our colleagues are having difficulty and to help them through the problem.
Yeah, to step in time of need.
Step in, not only on a global or national level, but also in the workplace. If
Right.
when one person knows that another individual is having problems, to help out, and we see lots of examples of this.
That's something that we are all very proud of. So, Chris, while we're still on the work-life balance, in this COVID world, to quite an extent, I mean, we've all discovered a new quote-unquote new normal in a way by becoming more digital savvy, and we've used digital technology that was in ways that was never used before. And there's also some emerging data now that shows that digital dependence and being connected to work over prolonged periods of time could also contribute to mental and emotional exhaustion, which itself could also add to burnout. So the question is, should this be the acceptable quote-unquote new normal? And if so, is this new normal sustainable?
Brief answer, it is not acceptable and it's not sustainable.
Right.
I think that this question intersects nicely with your last question. And as a brief vignette, I personally try to attend faculty meetings for departments across the university, specifically so that I get a sense of the issues that my faculty is dealing with. And one of these for our Department of Pediatrics, Dr. Rick Barr, he specifically focused a faculty meeting on burnout.
Right.
You may have been at that
Right,
faculty
yes,
meeting.
I have, absolutely.
And in
yes.
the breakout group, which I joined, the small group, the discussion led to the conclusion that probably the biggest contributor to burnout was digital overload.
It is.
Emails that never stop, the electronic medical record, and so forth.
Right.
As a result of that meeting, I worked with our IT department to address some of the concerns, but it's such a huge problem which isn't going away soon. It's going to need lots of ongoing attention. Very recently, I attended a section chief meeting for that same pediatric department, pediatric department. And the chief medical information officer at Arkansas Children's, who is, as you know, Pele Yu,
Right.
was presented information regarding the use of the EMR, which was very disturbing.
Right.
What he found was that many of our clinicians, and I'm sure this is true all across the country, were doing their electronic medical hours late into the evening and on weekends. And he had very nice graphs that showed the spike in activity. Clearly, our doctors are taking their work home and simply not getting a break. We all know that emails go on 24/7.
Yeah, it's a nonstop.
So Dr. Yu, as an example, has initiated a program to address the problem, and he calls it, very appropriately, quote, home for dinner,
Yes.
end quote. And I very much look forward to his progress in this, but it's representative of the sort of things we need to deal with digital stress.
As a matter of fact, so we got this email survey on the same program so that we can cut down, and this was a questionnaire to suggest what our needs are so we can cut down our digital dependence on EMR
Right.
once we get home, so there's at least some degree of normalcy when we're back home.
And I think it's more than electronic medical record. It is emails. People, work-related emails. Someone will be up late at night and fire off an email, and we all feel compelled to answer it. There
Right.
needs to be an approach to solve this problem.
Sure. So, in my multiple conversations with various guests in the past, one of my favorite topics is to discuss institutional culture. So professional well-being and professional development to a large extent also depends on institutional culture. I mean, a culture that sort of exhibits the fabric of its people. It affects our day-to-day work and determines our individual and to an extent our collective destiny. So purely from philosophical standpoint, why do you think it's imperative for any leadership to maintain and define an institutional culture that sticks to its core values?
This is the most important function of leadership, the most important. Establishment of culture based on ethical core values. In any organization, change of culture is not easily accomplished. Words, which is what most people use, do not solve the problem alone. What is required to change culture based upon core values is sustained messaging from senior leadership, from the top, if you will, backed up by actions, policies, and procedures, all of which support and demonstrate a commitment to ethically sound core values.
Right.
And I need to emphasize the word sustained, precisely because it takes time to change culture in large organizations. Leaders have to provide a clear explanation of and a commitment to core values.
Sure.
This needs to be followed by implementation of policies and procedures that support the values. And then the leaders must unfalteringly, and again I emphasize unfalteringly, display their commitment by walking the walk, if you will. There can be no deviation whatsoever, and only then, after sustained demonstration of commitment, does a leader earn the trust of the organization, and only then do we get culture change. It takes time. This is very difficult, but it is the most important and fundamental function of leadership.
Very well said. It is something that really not only carries us today, but will carry us all the way into future. No question about it. So let's talk about a little bit different topic: personal growth and success. And again, it's a totally philosophical question. So it's now that we're getting towards the end. So success means different things for different people, and such as achieving a specific goal, milestone, what have you, and maybe overcoming struggles for some people. And in some cultures, interestingly, especially in Eastern cultures where I come from, success, people measure their success by the success of their own kids' success, and so on. So the question is, what's your definition of success?
So, as you point out, everybody has a different definition of success based upon individual values and goals. And it's important to point out that personal success may be different than professional success.
Sure.
I define my personal success by whether my family, my wife Terry, and my children are healthy, happy, and fulfilled.
Right.
That's personally how I define my success. From a professional standpoint, I define my success by my adherence to core values, to dovetail off of what we just spoke about,
Right.
and whether my contributions to the organization make it a better place than I found it.
Yeah, very well said. Very well said. So definitely a lot of wisdom in there. So Chris, as we get to the end, so quite often in the past, what I've done is I've asked my guests if they would like to share an inspirational quote for, from literature. So personally, I'm a big fan of a person, Simon Sinek. You may have heard of him, and each one of his works and writings are loaded with wisdom. And one of my favorite quotes from him is, "Excitement comes from achievement, and fulfillment comes from the journey that got you there." So the question is for you, sir. Do you have any favorite inspirational quote, and what does it mean to you?
So I love the quote you just did.
Oh, thank you.
And if you think you're going to get by with just one quote, then you're sadly mistaken, because I love quotes.
Okay, great, awesome.
So I think that quotations obviously depend upon context, and so I have different quotes that I like in different situations.
Sure.
Regarding relationships, I think that Maya Angelou had it right. Quote, "People will forget what you said, they will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel." I think that's very apt.
Sure.
As a leader, I really am fond of Teddy Roosevelt's quote, "Do what you can with what you have where you are," end quote. And the dictum that the best thing you can do for an organization is to catch someone doing something right and to make it public.
Right.
But I think that overall, my guiding principles stem from the culture at West Point and the motto of West Point, which is duty, honor, and country. And the non-denominational cadet prayer at West Point asks, quote, make us to choose the harder right instead of the easier wrong. But we can't end on a solemn note, so on a lighter note, Mark Twain said the same thing. Quote, always do right. This will gratify some people and astonish the rest.
No, that is absolutely awesome. No, thank you, Dr. Westfall. Thank you so much for your time this afternoon. I absolutely enjoyed our conversation. We want to thank our listeners for tuning in. I hope you all enjoyed our conversation as much as I did, and if so, may I ask you to consider sharing this link of this podcast with your colleagues and friends on social media in this age of social distancing as we stay 6 feet apart with our masks on. Until we meet again next time, stay well, stay safe.